so can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You ready?
It should be recording. I don't know, the last time it said that it was it was like poor quality or something. It said poor quality, so it refused to record it, but it didn't say that this time, so it should be recording, but I'll run back and double check it in a second after I get you started, so.
Okay.
Alright. To begin, you all know me, I'm the host of Soul Mechanics, potentially former director of the Status Initiative, Donovan Neal, alias all kinds of other names. This is our actual host of Outcast Revolution, as we're calling it, Amanda Lepley, alias Mandy Leigh. And we'll start you off. I'm going to have to run and check something while she's giving our first answer, but we'll start you off by asking you to just kick into your story from as early as you can remember, I suppose, or whatever you think is your origin, presents into your origin of coming into your own.
Do you mean the first time I had any experiences?
Well, if there's anything you feel is leading into that, but yes.
Okay, yeah, I can do that.
All right, and I'm going to run and check that, and I can still hear you, so your voice is everywhere in the apartment now. Okay. Okay, so what I would say that led into, I don't know if you would call it awakening my abilities or what have you, but when I was about 6, 7-ish years old was when I had my first past life memory. And I was out in my grandmother's backyard playing. Back in the day, long ago, Walmart used to have these play sets that you could build, and they had like a slide and a swing, and it was nothing really fancy, but I was playing on it, and I was sliding down the slide, and all of a sudden, boom, I am in a completely different place, completely different time period, exiting this bank, and there's a male behind me, and I am to the front, and I have one bag of money in, I guess it would be my left hand, and because I was walking, it would be my left hand, and I remembered I stopped, and it was almost as if when I turned, I could see there was 3 cars leading up to the door of the bank, and the third car down was a police automobile, and there was 2 policemen on the same side, and they were hunched over next to the vehicle, and I stopped and looked at them, they looked at me, and maybe for about 20 seconds, it was almost like we were just staring at each other. Like none of us moved or anything. And it wasn't until I started walking again that I heard behind me, and I didn't look or anything. I kept my face forward, and I was looking at the automobile that I was walking towards. But I could hear behind me, the man behind me shooting at the police officers, and I could hear them shooting at him. But I didn't stop, I just kept going, and I got in the vehicle. And it was when I got in the vehicle that I somehow got back to where I was, and I was back in my grandmother's backyard. A few months after that is when I started to notice stuff started to happen, and I started to be able to do things. That I would say really was the catalyst for everything else that would happen later on in my life. Well, now you told me that you had a few experiences like this. Yes, but you asked for like the beginning experience.
Yeah.
That was the beginning experience that led on to the other stuff happening.
Can you tell me 2 questions? I have one. What would be the first sort of things that you started noticing you were able to do? And do you know anything? Can you expound on that? Like, do you have any idea what era you were in, what sort of time it was, or who those people might have been, or do you have any way of looking into that?
I believe I do know. That is who I was, but that is something that I would kind of like to be kept private on who I was, just because of who I was. From what it looked like, and obviously when you're young, you're not going to know. So it wasn't until I was older that I started to be able to kind of tap into my abilities, and that is when I started to learn from books on how to be able to pull visuals. And by being able to learn how to do that, I was able to re-look. Almost like, you know how when you rewatch certain scenes in a movie? It was kind of like that. I was able to learn how to do that. And I rewatched it, and I paid attention to how I was dressed and the surroundings around me and what everything looked like. And it looked like it was middle 20s-ish, in the 20s, 30s.
Yeah, that's about what I'm picturing. So what were the first things that you noticed you were able to do? You said you were able to start doing.
Yes. The first thing I was able to do, and I'm trying to remember how everything kind of went in order. The first thing I was able to do that I started to notice very strongly was when I would walk into a room, I was very sensitive to people's feelings. I could be in a room of 5 people or 20 people, and my emotions would pick up on other people's emotions. It wasn't until later that I learned the term is empathic. And the second ability that I noticed I had was intuitive, and I started to be able to pick up on things about people. And I believe I already told you this story, but I'll share it with everybody else. A friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, who had went on vacation with her family overseas while I was still in school. We had cell phones at the time, and it was about maybe 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I just woke up and I just felt very overwhelmed, like I was having a panic attack, and I started to cry, and immediately my friend's name came to mind, and I visually saw her crying, like I felt her emotions, like I was connected as though like she was right in the room with me. And I called her, and the first thing I said to her was, I was like, "Why are you crying?" And she was like, "How did you know I was crying? How did you know that?" And just other very bizarre things I started to be able to do, started to notice about people, and it would kind of scare people. Even I've lost a great deal of friends because they couldn't understand my abilities, and it scared them, and it scares a lot of people who don't understand about people with abilities and gifts and things. Ultimately, one thing I would like to stress is we're not trying to scare anybody. It's not like we set out to make you afraid of us. That's not what we're trying to do. It's, when we feel things and we pick up on things, it just happens, and before you know it, stuff comes out of our mouth, and it's almost like we're compelled to say things and to give messages and do things to help other people. We can't help that, and we can't control that, but when I was younger, it used to make me sad to see people to see my friends, especially, to see my friends being afraid of me. It definitely made me sad, because it made me feel like something was wrong with me, and it wasn't until I got older and got more confident and started realizing that there are other people like myself, and because of that, I got more confidence in my abilities and my gifts, and I don't really let people's words bother me anymore like I used to, but at the same time, it still does hurt that society and people in general still fear us. And that's one thing I would like to work on changing.
Alright, well, I'll ask you, but to refresh the audience, when she says we, she's speaking of the witch or the spellcrafting community.
Yes.
But we, obviously, all of us, wouldn't be considered amongst that community, so really, but Mandy's been kind of teaching me, and I've been picking up on it, but
a little bit. A little bit.
And I've had practice with casting before, so I know that it works. I've tested it out. I've seen that it's practical. But let me ask you one question, and then I'm going to run and check that again because I'm paranoid. I want to make sure that it's working before we carry on too long. But what would you say is the most spectacular thing that you can recall having done that you've been causal in, that wasn't just like an intuitive thing or something that you've actually manifested? And remember, everybody, I can still hear here, but you won't hear me. So
now, just a brief explanation from you. Can you elaborate on what you mean? Do you mean like spell wise, something that?
Yeah, or it doesn't necessarily have to be ritual practice, but something that you've been directly causal in, that you've actually influenced to happen directly.
Something that I actually influenced to happen. Well,
by decision.
Huh?
By decision, I mean.
By a decision.
Yeah.
That's a very good question. I don't know if this would be align with what you're talking about, but when let me see, I'm trying to think of what grade I was in when this happened. I was a junior. I was a junior in high school, and I had gotten involved with somebody that I shouldn't have gotten involved with, but that's a very long story. But I remember one day I was in this person's vehicle, and I started to sense that something really bad was going to happen. And I saw where we were, and I saw that I had an opportunity to get out of this situation. So I remember thinking to myself, and I didn't know that I could do this at the time, but I remember thinking to myself, that I wish something would happen that would stop this vehicle so that I could get out. And I just remember I would think it over and over and over again, and I would close my eyes, and I would picture something happening to the vehicle that this person was driving. And I just kept picturing and picturing and picturing it. I wasn't focused on anything else around me. I wasn't focused on anything. I was just visualizing it in my mind. And all of a sudden, as I had done that, I'm not sure how long I had been doing that for, because I didn't exactly look at the time or anything. But all of a sudden, the vehicle just literally gave out, like the engine blew. And this person got really pissed off, and I'm not going to name names or anything, but because of that, I was able to get out of the vehicle and get away from this person that I really never should have trusted to begin with. But that's one incident. I will tell you this. I have found that oftentimes I am able to do more when my emotions are at a heightened level. Like if I'm calm, I can't really do as much via my mind. But if I'm really sad, or if I'm really upset, or you know how when your emotions go to the extremes? If my emotions go to the extremes and I will something, if you will, I find that oftentimes if I can do that, I'm able to get what I want done.
Yeah, we find that the emotions are usually going to be the charge for this sort of thing. So that would be like the battery behind it.
Now, some people, it is worth noting, though, that some people who do have stronger abilities can do things when they're calmer, but just in regards to myself, and I'm just speaking, of myself, that oftentimes I have found in my experience that when my emotions are at a high is when I can do more. But that's just speaking for myself.
Yeah. So what other experiences, and remember everybody, I'm going to continue to run away periodically and check this because I'm paranoid about it, but tell us about what other experiences you've had seeing into other lives.
Oh my goodness. Well, to keep many long stories short, I have seen that I have had past lives in the Mayan times. I have seen that I have had at least 2 past lives in Egypt. I have seen I've had multiple past lives overseas. Only one, funnily enough, only one other past life in America. Only one. But all my other past lives were either overseas in various other countries, or they were in the 2 in Egypt, and I, as stated, I did have one life as a Mayan, because I remember the visuals that I saw, and that's how I knew that's what that was.
I had one, just to cut in there, I had one where I was in a Mayan colony, but I wasn't a Mayan. I was like some kind of an explorer. I think there might have been some kind of a conflict going on there, and I was a soldier of some kind.
There was many conflicts during that time.
I got stabbed by a bayonet.
Oh. In that life, there were so many illnesses running around. I remember I was very young in that life when I died. I ended up catching an illness and died from that illness. So that life was not a long one. I was still a child. Well, I mean, I wasn't a child, but I was still very, very young. I was barely in my teens, to put it that way.
So, I suppose cut to the nitty gritty of it. If you don't have, do you have anything else regarding your early childhood or whatnot that leading into this that you would consider to be an origin of sort?
I believe one thing I stated was a conversation that I had with my grandmother when I was younger. And my grandmother, rest in peace, was really the one who opened my eyes to my abilities, and she was really the only one in the family that sat down with me and discussed the fact that every relative in our family has had some sort of gift. And she told me about her mother and her father and my grandfather. See, my grandfather died when I was very young, so I never met my grandfather, but she told me this story about my grandfather. He was over in Vietnam during the war, during that time period of the war and all that. And before the attack on Pearl Harbor, she said that and she showed me, and I don't know where it is. I wouldn't even begin to, I could try to find it, but it would literally take a while for me to try to find it, but she showed me this letter where he wrote to her about how he was working on planes during that time period, building them or putting them together or what have you, and he touched a piece of metal and he saw instantaneously planes coming in and attacking us. And he said that he tried to go to his superior to tell him about seeing this, but the superior basically told him, oh, you've had a lack of sleep, you've been working too hard, go rest. He just laughed it off. He didn't believe him, but she said, I think about it and I look back, and she said, I wonder, and I also wonder this as well. had he been taken seriously and they were better prepared, would as many people have died? Now, please don't be blowing up the comments saying that I'm saying that he could have saved the whole thing from happening. I'm not saying that. Please don't twist my words. Donovan, you know what I mean.
Well, certainly a reality that he could have saved somebody. Right. But it stands to reason, because I do often think back on that. If he had been taken more seriously, would he have at least been able to save more lives? And before we've dabbled with this sort of a thing, before the military would have taken this sort of thing seriously too. So I mean,
right. That's what I was gonna say.
They do.
Back then, if you talk to what they talk now, they would put you in a straitjacket and send you off to a facility or something. They would have just assumed, oh my goodness, they're crazy. Oh my God. So yeah.
All right. So to get to the nitty gritty of it, the Outcast Revolution, obviously in the title, is meant to speak to people's burdens and struggles along these lines. And I know you said that it made you feel sad that people have feared you and such. But what would come to mind as the most immediate struggles you've had, or the?
Oh, that's a loaded question, Donovan. That's a very loaded question. You came prepared today, didn't you? Oh my goodness. Well, let's just get right down to it then. It's a mixture. The first thing I'll start on is people's assumptions. The assumptions about people that are born with abilities. Number one, our families did not sell their souls. They did not make a deal with Satan. There was nothing signed in blood. Okay? So please stop thinking that.
Our first interview that I did with one of the founding members, we spoke exactly on that. There was a girl who had done she did a live stream that she was talking about how spell crafting is all dealing with demons and such, and so we did a response interview to it with my ex-wife, who she was speaking on personal alchemy and practices along those lines, and so far as we can tell, none of us have signed contracts with demons or devils.
No, that is something that organized religion has spread to create fear. No one in my family signed any pacts. No one in my family worshipped Satan. They didn't sign anything in blood. They didn't drink any blood or anything of the sort. There was no blood use at all. Also, the second, that one, to me, that's one of the funnier ones, but it's still hurtful. One of the more serious ones that I have heard that is very hurtful is that people that are born with abilities are innately evil. That we have no heart, that we're cold, and that we'll just randomly put curses on people for no reason. That we're just evil, bad, heartless people. Right. And that is so billions of far from the truth. That is not in any facet true at all.
You see that sort of thing exemplified in Hollywood movies and shit sometimes, but really outside of the religious arena, that sort of thought doesn't really go around too much. People might think it's something strange about people who have certain abilities, but they find it interesting. They certainly don't think it's evil. There is really, outside of organized modern religion, there is no such thing as evil.
Right. And also, it's worth stating, my grandmother was a very religious person. She would go to church every Sunday. So I am not speaking ill of people's rights to believe what they want to believe. I support that wholeheartedly. Without a doubt, that's not my argument. But I wish people in organized religion would try to understand and not be so bought into that. And while they may be too afraid to accept it, at least try to understand it and learn that they may not be right on that. That is one thing I would like to try to change. Also, oh boy.
Let me tell you what.
In general, people's fear.
Right.
I think I've told you this, and this is probably one of the things that hurts me the most is when I go out in public, and I'm wearing my amulet or whatever I may be wearing at the time. I will have people literally, when they see it or when they see something that even looks remotely like that, I have seen people literally run. I have seen people, I have gone into restaurants and seen people who literally had food on their tables get up and move. And I have heard them say that they will not sit close or next to someone who has anything to do with Satan or someone who is evil.
The Graham amulet, then.
Right, exactly. And that is extremely, extremely hurtful because not only is it not true, it's just hurtful in general. For anyone to assume when you don't know. It's like when you go to another country and you listen to a language, just because to your ears what may sound like one word to you may not be actually what that word even means. So why are you going to assume that just because the word sounds that way, that it is that way?
Well, in most cases, we have a huge misunderstanding with language in general nowadays, just speaking on words themselves, which that's a whole topic that ties into this in and of itself that we'll speak about just shortly. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do right now is go ahead and clip this and see if it actually worked, and then we'll carry over into part 2.